But at the end of the day, if I had to make a decision, 2013 Ramy, 2023 RUBIEL MOSQUERA, who wins in a head-to-head competition? I say... Dave Palumbo here with another RX Muscle rant. Today's topic, who's better? Big Ramy from 2013 at his pro debut, or RUBIEL Neckzilla MOSQUERA, who made his pro debut in 2023. Both were at age 28 at the time of their debuts, and both of them really brought the bodybuilding world to their knees. Let's talk about Big Ramy 2013. I was in that auditorium in Teaneck, New Jersey for the New York Pro. Ramy stepped out on stage and the audience went crazy. If any of you guys have ever been to any New York Pros, the New York audiences are the best. I mean, if you're gonna compete in New York, that is the place to do it. Although we were technically in Jersey, it is the New York Pro, same audience though. And Ramy walked out and he was, it had to be 280 pounds. Maybe more. The numbers are very, very skeptical because some people say 300, some say 280, some say 290, but he was big. He was very big, probably 285 or somewhere around there. And we hadn't seen anyone that big since Ronnie Coleman had retired. And I don't think anyone expected to ever see anyone that big again. And Ramy just blew everyone's mind because not only was he big, but he had good proportion. He had a small waist, wide shoulders. His arms were really big back then. If you look at his arms from then to now, it's like night and day. I don't know what happened to his arms. He had big, big arms back then. He had a small waist. His lower back had detail that it doesn't have today. And his legs were amazing with no bumps and lumps in them and divots and all those other things that happened down the road. So Ramy walked out and he had good conditioning. He had glutes. Maybe his calves weren't the best, but Ramy never really had great calves. But when he walked out against Victor Martinez and they had that final call out, and Victor was really good at that show, and Victor was trying to requalify for the Olympia, he was, this was his comeback show, and he looked probably his best he had in a while. And Ramy beat him, and I know Victor was not happy about that, but I got to tell you, all the people who I was sitting next to in that auditorium, we all said, Ramy. And Ramy won because not only was he bigger than everyone else, but he had good proportion. He was wide-shouldered, small waist. He had a good V taper. He had all the bells and whistles you see in a guy who was going to be a great future bodybuilder. And I don't think anyone would argue with the fact that we all thought and knew at some point this guy would be Mr. Olympia. I think we thought it would happen sooner than it did because I think Ramy just had a lot of trouble nailing his conditioning and bringing in a look that was dry and Olympia worthy. But to his, obviously to his credit, he does have 2 Olympia Sandows sitting on his mantelpiece, so can't take those away from him. So Ramy did deliver in the end. Now, looking ahead, I should say, to 2023 at the Prague Pro last weekend, where not only did RUBIEL MOSQUERA make his pro debut, but he won his pro card the day before on Friday night. Imagine that, you win your pro card, you jump into your first pro show the next day and you're top 3 against the likes of the Arnold Classic champion and Mr. Olympia third place finisher Samson Dowda and Michael Krizo, who was top 10 at the Olympia. I mean, that's incredible. Ramy's, lineup in 2013 was not an Olympia guys, was not an Olympia lineup like RUBIEL had to compete against. Victor was great, but Victor was more at the end of his career than at the beginning of his career. RUBIEL was competing against the best guys in the world right off the bat, and he held his own and probably could have beat Michael Krizo. So the fact that he was third here was a huge feather in his cap. Now, when we look at RUBIEL, what we see is a prototypical, what I call super freak. The guy has incredible amounts of density, muscle, just billowy all over the place. He has every body part. His arms make Ramy's look like they were small, and Ramy had big arms. He's got calves. He's got quads. He's got density in his back. I mean, his traps are so big that they go right into his neck, and that's where he gets the nickname Neckzilla from. He's got pecs. He's got no weaknesses really in terms of muscle size. Could he be a little bit harder and drier, maybe a little bit more, muscle separation? Sure, but he's only 28 years old. He's just getting started now. This guy's going to be a future force to be reckoned with. There's no doubt in my mind. And from a pure freak standpoint of like dense, grainy, freaky muscle, where you want to just see the purity of it, Rubiel has got Ramy beat in that sense. But at the end of the day, what makes a great bodybuilder? What makes one guy beat another guy? The answer to that question is structure. Given equal amounts of muscle mass, because they both have freakishly large amounts of muscle mass, and they both have good conditioning, okay, and they both are the muscles well placed. What's the difference between the two? Well, Ramy's a lot wider. And I know it's hard to say because Rubiel's huge, but he's not quite as wide as Ramy. So Ramy has a better V taper. He has a more of an X frame than Rubiel has. And I think in the long run, in a head-to-head battle, and of course, I'm not going to put both pictures next to each other because it's not fair, because proportion and everything changes when you start putting pictures from one era next to a picture from another era. Unless you stand on stage next to each other, you can't get a good idea of what these guys would have looked like next to each other. But I can just conceptually, think about it. And Ramy is just wider than Rubiel. And that width and that proportion and that V taper and that small waist Ramy's got, I think in the very end would have pushed him past Rubiel in terms of a bodybuilding head-to-head competition from 2013 Ramy to 2023 Rubiel Mosquera. Moving forward into the future, Rubiel might have more potential than Ramy. From the people I've talked to who were there, Chris Cormier, among other guys who were in that audience, and people who know Rubiel, they tell me this guy is hungry. He's willing to go anywhere, do anything, and suffer to be the absolute best bodybuilder he can be. And I don't know if Ramy had that I'll go anywhere and I'll suffer through anything attitude. I think Ramy obviously loved bodybuilding. He still loves bodybuilding. And Ramy loved to train, but I don't know if he was a suffering type of guy. There's people that like to suffer and are willing to do it, and then there's people that, suffer but don't suffer that much. And I think Ramy was a guy who just didn't go to that place all the time, and that's why we got inconsistent results, and he got inconsistent, levels of conditioning on stage, because he just didn't push to that place. And you know what? Maybe if I was that genetically gifted, I wouldn't do it either. It's sometimes when things come too easy and you have too many gifts, you're not willing to go to the end of the earth to be your absolute best. Ronnie Coleman happened to be one of the rare individuals who had the genetic gifts and was willing to suffer as much as you made him suffer. He didn't care because he wanted to be the absolute best. I think Rubiel's got that desire in him. Whether he's got the tool set moving forward, I think he does, to be a great bodybuilder and win multiple Olympias, only time will tell. But in Ramy's defense, he's got 2 Sandows sitting on that mantelpiece, as I mentioned earlier, and those can never be taken away from him, as Dexter Jackson likes to remind us all the time. So Ramy, has proved himself, and Rubiel is just getting started. But at the end of the day, if I had to make a decision, 2013 Ramy, 2023 Rubiel Mosquera, who wins in a head-to-head competition? I say Ramy. Who do I like as a bigger super freak? Rubiel Mosquera. Victor Richards reincarnated for sure. I can't wait to see what this guy does in the future. It's going to be super exciting, and it's going to be super exciting for the sport of bodybuilding. Dave Palumbo with an RX Muscle Rant.